March 2019. Sun Jong Cave, Vietnam. A routine mapping expedition. By day 2, their survey data was recording locations they hadn't reached. Equipment appeared in chambers that didn't exist yesterday. The database showed timestamps from 6 days in the future. This is their documentation. I'm writing this because the cave mapping expedition to San Jong in March 2019 was approved as a Category 2 survey mission. Standard protocol, established routes, minimal environmental variables. The Vietnamese Institute of Geosciences cleared us for a 7-day structural analysis with full cartographic documentation. What I need you to understand is that San Jong had been explored, photographed, and commercially toured since 2009. We weren't pioneers. We were technicians updating digital survey data for the 2020 Geological Symposium. But on the morning of March 23rd, our GPS mapping files updated themselves while every member of the expedition was documented as sleeping. The timestamp was 3:17 a.m. The file size increased by 847 megabytes. We had recorded nothing new. My name is Lin Tran. I have been mapping cave systems in Southeast Asia for 11 years. Hang San Jong, Phong Nake Bang, the Mulu Caves in Borneo. I've spent 400 hours underground across 43 separate expeditions. I know how limestone formations behave. I know how water erodes karst topography over millennia. I know that caves don't change their fundamental architecture overnight. That's not geology. That's not how any of this works. Our team deployed from Phong Nha on March 21st with standard expedition parameters. Michael Brooks handled technical diving for the subterranean river systems. Jorge Alvarez managed geological sampling and structural analysis. And Anika Patel coordinated our digital mapping infrastructure. She ran the LiDAR arrays, processed the 3D modeling data, and maintained our survey databases. We had local support from the Phong Nha Bang National Park Authority and 2 Vietnamese guides who knew the access routes through the jungle approach. Total expedition complement: 7 personnel, 42 equipment cases. Enough supplies for 9 days, including safety margin. The hike to San Jong's entrance takes roughly 6 hours through primary rainforest. We established base camp 200 meters from the cave mouth on March 21st at 1840 hours. The weather was clear, unusual for the season, but welcome. Michael ran equipment checks on the diving apparatus, while Jorge set up the portable seismograph to monitor structural stability. Annika initialized the mapping system, calibrating our reference points against the 2013 British Cave Research Association survey data. Everything matched. The cave entrance coordinates were 17.4534 degrees north, 106.2887 degrees east, exactly as documented. The barometric readings inside the entrance chamber showed standard pressure differentials. No anomalies. We entered San Jong at 0620 hours on March 22nd. The descent into the main passage is a controlled rappel down an 80-meter limestone wall. Technical but routine for anyone with cave expedition experience. The scale of San Jong still overwhelms you, even when you've studied the dimensions. The main chamber stretches 200 meters wide and 150 meters high in sections. You can fit a 40-story building inside certain passages. The subterranean river runs through the entire 5-kilometer surveyed length. There are sections where the ceiling collapsed millennia ago, creating massive dolines, jungle sinkholes where trees grow 80 meters below the surface level. Sunlight streaming down into underground forests. Our mapping protocol was systematic. We divided Sanjiang into 7 survey sectors, matching the 2013 baseline data. Each sector received comprehensive LiDAR scanning. Anika's equipment projects 500,000 laser pulses per second to generate precision 3D models accurate to 2 centimeters. We were updating the structural data and cross-referencing geological changes over the 6-year interval. Standard scientific methodology. We placed 147 physical survey markers throughout the cave system. Aluminum tags with GPS coordinate stamps and unique identification codes. Each marker's position was triple verified. LiDAR measurement, handheld GPS unit, and manual recording in our field logs. The work went exactly as planned on March 22nd. We completed sectors 1 through 4 by 15:30 hours, the entrance chamber, the first major passage, the Hand of Dog formation, and the northern Doline section. Michael surveyed the subterranean river depth and flow rates. Jorge collected geological samples from 6 different strata layers, documenting the aragonite crystal formations and the calcite deposits. The temperature held steady at 20 to 24 degrees Celsius, depending on proximity to the river. Humidity remained at 95%. Radio communication with base camp maintained clarity throughout. We returned to the surface at 18:20 hours, documented our survey data, and transmitted our daily progress report to the Institute in Hanoi via satellite uplink. Anika spent 2 hours that evening processing the LiDAR data. The 3D models rendered cleanly, millions of point cloud measurements assembling into detailed architectural reconstructions of the cave interior. She cross-referenced our new scans against the 2013 survey files. The dimensional variations were minimal, well within expected parameters for natural geological processes. The main passage had widened by 8 to 12 centimeters in the 6-year interval due to water erosion. The calcite formations showed 2 to 3 millimeters of growth. Everything was behaving exactly as karst geology predicts. Everything made sense. We were asleep by 2200 hours. Base camp protocol requires staggered watch rotations, but in March 2019 we were operating under modified procedures. The Vietnamese guides maintained perimeter security while the technical team rested between survey days. The camp was equipped with motion-activated lights and a basic alarm system for wildlife. The equipment cases were secured and weatherproofed. Our satellite communication system remained active for emergency transmission capability. Nothing unusual occurred during the night. The guide logs show routine hourly check-ins until 0600 hours wake-up call. Anika noticed the file discrepancy at 0635 hours on March 23rd while preparing the day's survey equipment. She was transferring the previous day's processed LiDAR data from her primary workstation to the backup storage drives in standard data redundancy protocol. The file directory showed that Sundung Survey Sector 4.las had been modified at 0317 hours. The file size had increased from 1.24 gigabytes to 2.09 gigabytes. She checked her workstation logs. No processing tasks had been scheduled during night hours. No one had accessed the system. The laptop had been closed and powered down since 21:45 hours the previous evening. She called me over to examine the data. I pulled up the modified file. The LiDAR scan of Sector 4, the northern Doline section, had been supplemented with additional survey data. The new point cloud measurements extended the mapped area by approximately 340 meters beyond where we had actually surveyed. The data quality was identical to our equipment's output specifications. 500,000 pulses per second, 2 centimeter accuracy, proper GPS coordinate integration. But we hadn't scanned that area. We had ended our Sector 4 survey at marker position S4147, roughly 80 meters before this new data began. Jorge suggested equipment malfunction. Possibly the LiDAR system had continued recording during our equipment pack-up without Annika noticing. But the timestamp was wrong. We had exited the cave at 18:20 hours. This data was logged at 03:17 hours. 9 hours later, while we were sleeping on the surface. Michael proposed data corruption, maybe a GPS error causing coordinate displacement, but the measurements were pristine. No digital artifacts, no corrupted segments. Annika ran 3 different diagnostic protocols on her workstation. The hardware checks came back clean. No malware, no system errors, no unauthorized access logs. We had 2 options: abort the expedition and report equipment irregularities, or continue the survey and investigate the data anomaly after completing our mission parameters. The Institute was expecting our full survey results by March 28th. We had allocated 7 days for comprehensive mapping, abandoning the mission on day 2 because of mysterious file modifications seemed, at the time, like overreaction. We decided to proceed with the day's scheduled survey work. Sectors 5 and 6, covering the Garden of Eden section and the Great Wall of Vietnam Formation. We would document everything with redundant recording systems and resolve the data issue during evening analysis. We descended into Son Duong at 07:15 hours on March 23rd. The entrance rappel felt identical to the previous day. The main chamber looked unchanged. We navigated to our starting position for Sector 5 using the physical survey markers we had placed on March 22nd. Marker S4-092 was exactly where we had left it, mounted on a limestone outcrop 340 meters into the main passage. Marker S4-108 remained in position at the Doline entrance. Everything was precisely as documented. We began the Sector 5 survey at 0840 hours. Annika initialized the LiDAR system and confirmed GPS calibration. The handheld units showed our position as 17.4522 degrees north, 106.2901 degrees east, correct for the Garden of Eden approach. But when Jorge checked his compass for geological orientation readings, the needle was rotating, not fluctuating. Rotating. Continuous clockwise motion, completing 1 full revolution approximately every 8 seconds. He tapped the compass housing. The rotation continued. He pulled out his backup compass. Same behavior. Michael checked his diving compass. Identical rotation pattern. Magnetic anomalies can occur in cave systems due to iron-rich mineral deposits. But compasses don't spin. They deflect. They point toward magnetic north or toward local magnetic interference. They don't perform steady rotational patterns like a clock's second hand. Jorge placed his compass on a flat limestone surface and filmed it with his head cam. 12 rotations per minute. Perfectly consistent. Annika checked the GPS units. They were functioning normally, maintaining satellite lock, displaying accurate coordinate data. Whatever was affecting the magnetic compasses wasn't interfering with GPS signal reception. We continued the survey, despite the compass malfunction, because GPS remained operational and our LiDAR mapping didn't depend on magnetic orientation. Annika documented the anomaly in her field log with timestamp and video evidence. But our primary mission was cartographic data collection, not geomagnetic research. Jorge hypothesized localized magnetic mineral concentrations in the limestone strata. Unusual, but not impossible. We proceeded into Sector 5 at 0855 hours, following our physical survey markers from the previous day's route planning. The Garden of Eden section sits approximately 1.2 kilometers into Son Duong's main passage. It's named for the massive stalagmite formations that resemble ancient garden sculptures, some reaching 70 meters in height. The British survey team in 2013 had documented 89 major formations in this sector. Our job was to create updated 3D models showing any growth or erosion over the 6-year interval. Annika positioned the LiDAR array at Survey Point Alpha, the same location used in the 2013 baseline study. She initiated the scanning sequence at 0910 hours. The LiDAR system projects its laser grid in a 360-degree horizontal sweep, building the point cloud layer by layer. The process generates a distinctive clicking sound as the laser pulses fire, 500,000 times per second. But the mechanical rotation of the array housing produces an audible rhythm. Annika had run this exact equipment through 200-plus cave surveys. She knew its operational sound signature perfectly. At 0918 hours, the clicking pattern changed. The frequency increased, not dramatically, maybe 10 to 15% faster than the standard operational speed, but consistent. She checked the equipment display. The system reported normal pulse rate, 500,000 per second. No errors, no warnings. She stopped the scan and ran diagnostics. Every system check returned green status indicators. She restarted the scanning sequence. The clicking pattern resumed at the elevated frequency. Michael asked if the equipment was overheating. Temperature sensors showed 23 degrees Celsius, well within operational parameters. Jorge suggested the acoustic properties of the cave chamber might be distorting our perception of the sound. Possible. The Garden of Eden has complex echo patterns due to the stalagmite formations. But Annika had worked in acoustic nightmare environments. Vertical shafts, narrow passages, water-filled chambers. She knew what equipment malfunction sounded like versus environmental acoustic distortion. We completed the Sector 5 survey by 11:40 hours despite the equipment irregularities. The LiDAR data appeared clean when Annika reviewed the preliminary results on her field tablet. The stalagmite formations rendered properly in the 3D visualization. The measurements aligned with expected geological parameters. We broke for lunch at Survey Point Beta, roughly 1.6 kilometers into the cave system. Michael tested the subterranean river depth with the portable sonar unit. The reading showed 8.4 meters, consistent with our previous day's measurements 200 meters downstream. Water temperature was 19 degrees Celsius. Flow rate approximately 2.3 meters per second. Everything normal. Except the compass. Jorge's compass was still rotating. Same 8-second revolution cycle. We had traveled nearly 300 meters from where we first observed the phenomenon. The magnetic anomaly was either following us, which made no geological sense, or we were inside a much larger area of magnetic disturbance than initially assessed. Jorge collected rock samples from the chamber walls. He wanted to analyze the mineral content to identify potential magnetic sources. The samples looked like standard limestone, calcium carbonate with minor iron oxide inclusions. Nothing that would generate a rotational magnetic field. We entered Sector 6 at 12:55 hours. This section encompasses the Great Wall of Vietnam, a 90-meter calcite barrier that formed over millions of years where two separate cave passages converged. It's one of Son Jung's most photographed features. We had physical survey markers leading to this section, S5-034 through S5-041, placed yesterday during our route reconnaissance. The markers should have been visible with our headlamps from 40 to 50 meters away. They're made of reflective aluminum specifically for long-distance identification in low-light conditions. We couldn't find marker S5-034. We were standing at the correct GPS coordinates according to our handhelds. 17.4518 degrees north, 106.2914 degrees east. This was exactly where we had mounted S5-034 on a limestone outcrop at chest height, 1.8 meters above the cave floor. I remember placing it personally. I had hammered in the anchor bolt and verified the GPS stamp. The limestone outcrop was still there. The anchor hole was not. No damage, no sign of removal. The rock's surface was smooth and undrilled, as if we had never touched it. Michael suggested we had misremembered the GPS coordinates, but Annika pulled up yesterday's survey log on her tablet. The coordinates were exact. 17.4518 degrees north, 106.2914 degrees east. The field notes included a photograph of the marker in position, timestamp 14:47 hours on March 22nd. I was in the photograph, standing next to the marker for scale reference. We were at the right location. The marker was gone, not removed, absent, as if it had never been installed. We searched the immediate area for the remaining Sector 5 markers, S5-035 through S5-041. None were present. 8 markers, 8 different GPS positions, all carefully documented with photographs and written logs, all missing. But we found something else. We found marker S6-012. This should have been impossible because we hadn't surveyed Sector 6 yet. We hadn't placed any markers beyond S5-041. But there it was. Aluminum tag, unique identification code, SWIA6-012, mounted on a limestone wall 3.2 meters above the cave floor. Fresh installation, no oxidation on the metal. Clean anchor bolt, recent tool marks on the rock surface. Annika checked her survey database. There was no entry for marker S6-012. She checked the backup logs. Nothing. She checked the pre-expedition planning documents where we had designated marker identification codes. S6-012 was allocated for use in Sector 6, but we hadn't reached that position yet. The marker shouldn't exist, but we were looking at it. I climbed up to examine it more closely. The aluminum tag had our expedition designation etched into the surface. VIGS-SD-2019, Vietnamese Institute of Geosciences, Sun Jong Survey, 2019, our identifier, our equipment, but we hadn't placed it. Jorge proposed that the Vietnamese guides had entered the cave during the night and continued our survey work for reasons we couldn't understand. But that didn't explain how they would have our specific equipment, our identification codes, our GPS coordination system. And why would they remove 8 markers while placing others? Michael suggested yesterday's team members had placed the markers during a period we couldn't remember. Some kind of collective confusion about the timeline. But we had documented every action yesterday. We had photographs, video footage, GPS logs with timestamps. 14 hours of comprehensive documentation, no gaps, no missing time. We decided to return to base camp. The situation had exceeded equipment malfunction or navigational error. Physical evidence was contradicting our documented records. We needed to review all our data, contact the Institute, and determine whether the expedition should continue under these conditions. We began the return journey at 14:20 hours, following our headlamp beams back toward the main passage. Marker S4-147 should have been our navigation reference point. It was the last marker we had placed in Sector 4 yesterday, positioned at a passage junction where the route to the northern doe line diverged from the main chamber path. We reached the junction at 15:05 hours. The GPS coordinates were correct. 17.4525 degrees north, 106.2898 degrees east. But marker S4-147 wasn't there. Instead, we found marker S7-003. Sector 7 hadn't been designated yet. We had only planned survey work through Sector 6. There was no Sector 7 in our expedition parameters. I touched the marker. The metal was cold. Cave temperature, approximately 22 degrees Celsius. The anchor bolt was solid, professionally installed. The identification code was stamped, not hand-etched. S7-003VGS-SD-2019. I looked at Annika. She was checking her tablet, scrolling through the survey database with increasing speed. Her hands were shaking. She said the database now contained entries for Sector 7, complete survey data, LiDAR scans, GPS coordinates, geological notes, all time-stamped from March 23, 2019, between 0:24:50 and 0:4:15 hours, while we were sleeping on the surface. Michael asked to see the tablet. He reviewed the Sector 7 files. The LiDAR data showed a previously unmapped passage extending 480 meters beyond the known terminus of Sanjong. The geological notes were written in English. Technical language, proper terminology, detailed observations about limestone formations and hydrological features. The writing style matched Jorge's field documentation. But Jorge was reading over Michael's shoulder, and Jorge hadn't written these notes. The GPS coordinates placed Sector 7 at bearing 094 degrees from our current position. Michael pointed his headlamp in that direction. There was a passage opening. It shouldn't exist according to every previous survey of Sanjong Cave. We stood at that junction for 11 minutes without speaking. Our headlamps illuminated the passage entrance, dark space extending beyond our light range, cool air flowing outward, carrying the smell of water and limestone. Jorge finally said what we were all thinking. Someone else was in this cave. Someone with our equipment, our codes, our survey methodology. They were mapping Sanjong ahead of us, leaving markers in positions we hadn't reached, generating data files that appeared in our system without authorization. But Sanjong had only one accessible entrance. We would have encountered another expedition during our descent. The Vietnamese guides were monitoring the entrance. No one else had entered. Unless they were already inside. Unless they had been inside before we arrived. Unless the cave had more than one entrance. I suggested we proceed to the new passage and investigate. Michael refused. Violation of cave expedition protocol. Unknown passages require specialized equipment, additional safety measures, communication with surface support. We weren't prepared for exploratory survey work. Annika sided with Michael. Jorge wanted to at least examine the passage entrance, document its existence, and return to base camp with photographic evidence. We approached the Sector 7 passage at 15:23 hours. The opening was approximately 4 meters wide and 6 meters high, large enough for comfortable access. The walls showed no tool marks, no sign of artificial excavation. This was a natural formation, but it hadn't been documented in any previous survey. The British team in 2013 had mapped this exact junction. Their report described a solid limestone wall at bearing 094 degrees. No passage? No opening? We were looking at a cave tunnel that shouldn't exist according to 6 years of established scientific data. Jorge entered the passage first, against protocol, but driven by geological curiosity that overrode his safety training. The rest of us followed because leaving a team member alone in an unmapped cave section violated every expedition guideline we had. The passage floor was smooth limestone, sloping downward at approximately 8 degrees gradient. Our headlamps revealed calcite formations on the walls, standard cave architecture, nothing unusual except that this entire passage had apparently materialized in the 6 years since the British survey. Michael kept checking behind us, confirming the entrance remained visible. The compass on his wrist continued its 8-second rotation cycle. 50 meters into the passage, we encountered marker S7-008, then S7-014 at 70 meters, then S7-021 at 95 meters. Each marker perfectly placed, each GPS coordinate logged in Anika's database with timestamps between 0245 and 0415 hours on March 23rd. The survey notes described what we were seeing. Passage maintains consistent 4 by 6 meter dimensions. Gradual descent, minimal debris accumulation. Dry conditions suggest infrequent water flow. Jorge's documentation style. Jorge's technical vocabulary. Jorge's observational patterns. But Jorge was reading these notes for the first time, standing next to me in a passage he had never entered before this moment. At 120 meters depth, the passage opened into a chamber. Our headlamps couldn't reach the far walls. The space was too large. Anika activated a chemical light stick and threw it toward the center of the chamber. The green glow fell for 3 seconds before hitting the ground. The light illuminated a roughly circular space, perhaps 40 meters in diameter. The ceiling was out of headlamp range. But what stopped us was the equipment. 6 equipment cases were stacked against the western wall of the chamber. They were identical to our cases. Waterproof polymer construction, expedition-grade latches, equipment designation labels. I approached the nearest case and read the label. VIGS-SD-2019, LIDARARAYCOMPONENTS-CASE 3 of 7. Our expedition code. Our equipment inventory numbering. Case 3 was currently at our base camp on the surface, 200 meters from the cave entrance, secured in the equipment storage area. I had personally verified the equipment manifest during morning checks at 0630 hours. Case 3 was on the surface. Case 3 was also here, 120 meters underground in a previously undocumented chamber. Michael opened Case 3. Inside were LIDAR array components, laser projection units, power supply modules, mounting brackets, calibration tools, identical to our equipment. He checked the serial numbers against his field inventory list. The numbers matched. These were our components, the exact units we had transported from Hanoi. But our equipment was on the surface. We had used the LIDAR system this morning in the Garden of Edam section. The equipment couldn't be in 2 locations simultaneously. Jorge found Case 7 behind the others. Case 7 contained geological sampling equipment, sample storage containers, field analysis tools. He pulled out a sample container labeled SD 2019 G047. The container held a limestone fragment with visible iron oxide inclusions. He opened his own equipment pack and retrieved his most recent geological sample, collected in Sector 5 3 hours earlier. Sample SD 2019 G047, the same designation. He compared the rock fragments. They were identical, same size, same shape, same mineral patterns, same collection point based on his field notes. He had collected this sample once. It existed in 2 containers. Anika was examining the chamber walls with her headlamp, mapping the space systematically. She found something carved into the limestone near the passage entrance. Not carved, etched. Laser etched with precision equipment. Text in English. Survey incomplete. Structural instability detected. Recommend immediate withdrawal. L. Tran. My name, my recommendation. But I hadn't etched anything into the cave wall. I didn't have laser etching equipment. I approached the text and touched it. The edges were sharp, recent work, possibly hours old. The letters were 8 centimeters high, professionally executed, clearly visible from 10 meters away. A warning. From me. To us. Michael's radio crackled. Not our standard communication channel. We were too deep for surface contact. This was a different frequency. Static, then a voice. Female voice. Speaking Vietnamese, then switching to English. Survey team, this is base camp. Confirm your position. You are 40 minutes overdue for scheduled check-in. Annika responded. Base camp, we are in an undocumented chamber, approximately 1.2 kilometers from entrance. Depth uncertain. Experiencing equipment anomalies. Request guidance. Silence. 30 seconds of static. Then the voice returned. Negative copy on your position. GPS telemetry shows your team on the surface at base camp coordinates. All units report status green. No expedition in progress. I grabbed Annika's radio and transmitted. Base camp, this is Lin Tran, expedition lead. Confirm our departure time and current mission status. The response came immediately. Tran, you are currently at base camp. Mission completed March 22nd, 1845 hours. Survey data transmitted to Institute. Team scheduled for extraction. March 24th, 0800 hours. Advise you check your equipment if you are receiving false location data. I looked at my watch. 1547 hours. March 23rd, 2019. We had been underground for 8 hours and 32 minutes. According to base camp, we had completed the entire mission yesterday and were currently on the surface. Jorge suggested we return to the entrance immediately and resolve this confusion with direct visual confirmation from the guides. But when we turned back toward the passage entrance, the opening had changed. Not collapsed, changed. The passage we had entered was 4 meters wide. The passage we were looking at was 2 meters wide. The wall configuration was different. The calcite formations were different. Michael pulled out his GPS unit. The coordinates showed our position as 17.4516 degrees north, 106.2921 degrees east, approximately 340 meters from where we should be based on our entry point. The chamber itself had displaced, or we had displaced within it. Annika opened her tablet and accessed the full survey database. The files now showed 8 complete sectors. Sector 8 data had been added with timestamps from March 24th, 2019, between 0600 and 0945 hours. Tomorrow's date. The geological notes described a collapsed chamber section, unstable ceiling structures, and a recommendation for expedition termination due to seismic risk. The notes were attributed to Jorge Alvarez. Jorge read his own future documentation in silence. His hands had stopped shaking. He had moved past fear into some other state, absolute focus on the data, the evidence, the impossibility we were documenting. The chemical light stick was burning out. We had maybe 90 seconds before the chamber returned to complete darkness. Michael activated his emergency beacon, a high-intensity strobe designed for cave rescue situations. The strobe illuminated the chamber in harsh white pulses. That's when we saw the markers. The walls were covered with survey markers, hundreds of them. Different identification codes: S9 series, S10 series, S11 series. Continuing upward into designations we hadn't created. Each marker perfectly installed, each GPS coordinate logged in Annika's database with future timestamps extending through March 27th, 28th, 29th into April. I made the decision to document everything and withdraw. We had 4 cameras, 12 hours of battery life, and enough evidence to demonstrate that Sunjong Cave was exhibiting spatial properties inconsistent with established geology. Whether we were experiencing equipment failure, environmental phenomena, or something beyond current scientific understanding. Our responsibility was to preserve the data and extract safely. We spent 20 minutes photographing the chamber, the equipment cases, the wall markers, the laser-etched warning. Annika copied the complete survey database to 3 separate storage devices. Jorge collected rock samples from the chamber walls for laboratory analysis. We returned to the surface using GPS navigation and our remaining physical markers. The exit took 3 hours and 40 minutes. We emerged from Sunjong at 1927 hours on March 23rd. The Vietnamese guides confirmed we had been underground for approximately 13 hours. They had not encountered any other expedition teams. They had not received any radio transmissions from us since our 0715 descent. Base camp equipment inventory showed all cases present and accounted for. Case 3 and Case 7 were secured in the storage area, undisturbed. Annika's survey database contained data for 11 sectors, totaling 8.7 kilometers of mapped cave passage. Sunjong's documented length is 5.0 kilometers. The additional data described chambers, passages, and geological features that do not appear in any existing survey. The timestamps extended through March 29th, 6 days beyond our current date. The final entry, logged at 21:34 hours on March 29th, was a mission termination notice filed by me. Expedition abandoned due to structural instability and equipment failure. Recommending Sunjong be closed to all access pending geological assessment. We transmitted our data to the Vietnamese Institute of Geosciences on March 24th. The Institute suspended all commercial and scientific access to Sunjong on March 25th. The official reason cited was potential seismic instability requiring geological evaluation. No evaluation has been conducted. The cave remains closed. Our expedition report was classified under Institute security protocols. Michael Brooks left cave exploration work in April 2019. Jorge Alvarez transferred to surface geological studies. Annika Patel deleted her field database and destroyed the backup storage devices. She told me she couldn't look at the data anymore without seeing future timestamps accumulating, dates creeping forward into time we hadn't reached. I'm writing this in January 2026 because the final database entry I documented in March 2019 showed a timestamp of January 13th, 2026 at 20:43 hours. Today's date, tonight's time. The entry is a survey marker designation, S47-889. The GPS coordinates place it in a chamber 47 kilometers from Sunjong's entrance. A chamber that would require 12 days of continuous underground navigation to reach. A chamber the cave couldn't contain based on regional topography. The entry notes read, "Final marker position, survey complete. Recommend sealing all access points permanently. L. Tran." I did not write that entry. I have not returned to Sunjong since March 2019. But according to the database I copied 7 years ago, I will complete that survey today. The data is already recorded. The cave is already mapped. The expedition is already finished. I just haven't done it yet.